Captain Jake Morrison had been hauling cargo across the galaxy for 15 years, and in all that time he'd never once been pulled over by space cops. Sure, he'd bent a few hyperspace speed limits, maybe smuggled some contraband whiskey past a temperance colony or two, but nothing serious. Nothing that warranted the flashing blue lights now strobing behind his beat-up freighter, the Rusty Bucket. "Well, this is just fantastic," Jake muttered, pulling his ship out of hyperspace near some backwater checkpoint station. He'd been looking forward to his breakfast for the past 3 hours, and now some cosmic rent-a-cop was going to delay his morning coffee? Again? The comm system crackled to life with a voice that sounded like someone gargling marbles. "Attention, primitive vessel. You will submit to immediate inspection by order of the Galactic Council. Prepare to be boarded." Jake rolled his eyes and activated the docking clamps. Yeah, come aboard. Just try not to track mud on my floors." The airlock hissed open, and in walked the most pretentious alien Jake had ever seen. Commander Vextal of the Galactic Customs Authority stood 7 feet tall, with purple skin that seemed to shimmer, 4 arms crossed in what Jake assumed was supposed to be an intimidating pose, and a hat that looked like it had been stolen from a marching band. His 3 eyes scanned Jake's cargo hold with the intensity of someone hunting for the galaxy's most wanted criminal. "Human," Vextal announced in a tone that suggested Jake had personally insulted his mother. "You stand accused of transporting weapons of mass destruction across 17 star systems." Jake blinked. "Weapons? Buddy, I'm hauling machine parts to Kepler Station. The most dangerous thing on this ship is my personality. Do not attempt to deceive me with your primitive humor," Vexel snapped, producing a scanner that beeped ominously as he waved it around. "Our sensors detected your cargo from 3 parsecs away. The toxic signatures are off the charts." The scanner started beeping faster as Vextal approached Jake's personal quarters, where his breakfast cooler sat on the small table. Jake had packed it carefully that morning, a little taste of home to get him through another long haul. Century eggs from his favorite market in New Shanghai, some leftover fermented shark from his cousin's wedding in Iceland, a bottle of ghost pepper hot sauce that could strip paint, and of course his emergency bacon. "There!" Vextal pointed dramatically at the innocent-looking cooler. "The source of the contamination." Jake stared at him. "That's my lunch, not a biological weapon." "Your what?" The alien's voice cracked slightly. "My food. You know, sustenance. The stuff you eat to not die." Vextal's 3 eyes widened in what Jake was pretty sure was horror. "You mean to tell me that you consume these toxic substances voluntarily?" "Well, when you put it like that, it sounds weird, but yeah." Jake scratched his head. "Look, can we speed this up? My coffee's getting cold, and I haven't had my morning caffeine fix yet. Trust me, you don't want to see me before coffee." But Vextal was already backing toward the door, his scanner now screaming like a smoke alarm at a barbecue convention. "By the 7 moons of Zorglax, the legends are true. Humans really are the most dangerous species in the galaxy." Jake watched the alien flee his ship with growing confusion. "Dangerous? I drive a space truck and collect vintage bottle caps. How is that dangerous?" But Vextal was already on his comm, speaking rapidly in what sounded like panicked clicking noises. Jake caught enough universal standard to understand phrases like "confirm biological warfare capabilities" and "immediate quarantine protocols." "Oh, come on," Jake said to his empty ship. "It's just breakfast." 20 minutes later, Jake found himself sitting in what the aliens called an interrogation chamber, but looked more like a dentist office designed by someone who'd only heard dentist offices described in nightmares. The walls pulsed with an unsettling green light, and the chair seemed to be trying to read his mind, which was honestly kind of rude. Commander Vextal paced back and forth in front of him, occasionally stopping to point accusingly at a holographic display showing Jake's breakfast items spinning slowly in midair like evidence in a murder trial. "Let's start with this," Vextal said, zooming in on the bottle of hot sauce. "Ghost pepper extract. A substance so corrosive it could eat through the hull of a starship." "It's for flavor," Jake said weakly. "Flavor?" A new voice squeaked from the corner. Jake turned to see what appeared to be a walking pile of tentacles wearing a lab coat. "Did he say flavor?" "Dr. Quinoa," Vextal said with the patience of someone explaining quantum physics to a goldfish. "Meet the human." "Human, this is our xenobiologist. Try not to traumatize him further." Dr. Quinoa approached cautiously, his tentacles quivering like he was walking through a minefield. "Fascinating. The specimen appears calm despite carrying enough toxins to sterilize a small mood." "Specimen?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "Buddy, I have a name. It's Jake." The tentacled doctor immediately fainted, hitting the floor with a wet thud. "You see what you've done?" Vextal gestured dramatically at the unconscious scientist. "Poor Quinoa spent 6 years studying Earth's atmospheric readings. He still has nightmares about your oxygen levels." Jake stared at the pile of tentacles on the floor. Our oxygen levels are nightmare fuel? 21%, Vextal shuddered. It's basically rocket fuel. How your entire species hasn't exploded yet is beyond our comprehension. Well, when you put it like that, it does sound pretty metal, Jake admitted. But seriously, we're not dangerous. I mean, look at me. I'm wearing a t-shirt with a cartoon cat on it. Vextal squinted at Jake's shirt, which indeed featured a grumpy-looking tabby with the words Monday Mood underneath. Is that some kind of war cry? It's a meme. A what? Never mind. Jake rubbed his temples. Look, can someone please explain why my breakfast is apparently a war crime? Dr. Quinoa stirred on the floor, mumbling something about fermented death fish before passing out again. Your species, Vextal began with the tone of someone delivering a terminal diagnosis, consume substances that would kill 97% of known galactic life forms. The remaining 3% would wish they were dead. That's just not true, Jake protested. Humans share food all the time. It's like a bonding thing. The silence that followed was so profound that Jake could hear his own heartbeat. Vextal's 3 eyes blinked in sequence, like a computer trying to process an impossible equation. You share these weapons with each other? He whispered. We call it potluck. The emergency klaxons were still blaring when they dragged Jake into what looked like a combination courtroom and bomb disposal unit. A dozen alien species sat behind reinforced glass barriers, all wearing what appeared to be hazmat suits. Jake was beginning to feel like a walking nuclear reactor, which, considering he hadn't even had his morning coffee yet, wasn't entirely inaccurate. Right, Jake announced to the assembled alien council. Since you all seem to think I'm some kind of biological weapon, how about I prove you wrong by eating my breakfast? You know, the thing I do every morning without dying. The collective gasp from the gallery sounded like air being sucked out of an airlock. He's going to consume the toxins, one alien whispered. In front of witnesses. This is either suicide or the most terrifying display of dominance I've ever seen, muttered another. Dr. Quinoa, who had been revived with what looked like alien smelling salts, was frantically scribbling notes. Fascinating. The human appears to be entering some kind of pre-consumption ritual. It's called opening a cooler, Jake said, popping the lid. The assembled aliens immediately recoiled, as if he'd released a live grenade. First, Jake pulled out his thermos of coffee. The liquid was still steaming, black as space and twice as bitter. This is coffee, he announced, unscrewing the cap. It's a mild stimulant made from ground-up seeds. Mild stimulant? Admiral Zephyr, a bug-like creature with more metals than Jake had ever seen on one being, leaned forward. Our scans indicate that substance could keep Orexian awake for 17 years. Yeah, that's kind of the point, Jake said, taking a long sip. The relief of caffeine hitting his system was immediate and glorious. Ah, that's better. Half the council fainted. Next came the bacon. Jake had packed it in a small container, still warm from the breakfast he'd made that morning. The smell of cured pork filled the chamber, and Jake swore he could see several aliens turning green. Which was impressive considering most of them were already green. This is bacon, Jake said, taking a bite. It's cured meat from an animal called a pig. Cured? Dr. Quinoa's voice cracked. You mean it was diseased? No, it means it's been preserved with salt and smoke and... Jake stopped as he noticed Admiral Zephyr was now wearing what looked like a full environmental suit. Guys, this is getting ridiculous. Preserved flesh, the Admiral whispered into his comm. Add that to the file. The human willingly consumes decomposing tissue. It's not decomposing, it's delicious, Jake protested. But he was talking to a room full of beings who were now treating him like he was juggling live grenades while riding a unicycle made of plutonium. Finally, Jake cracked open one of his sentry eggs. The preserved duck egg, black and gelatinous, was admittedly an acquired taste, but Jake had acquired it years ago during a layover on New Hong Kong Station. The reaction was immediate and spectacular. 3 more aliens fainted. Dr. Quinoa started hyperventilating, and Admiral Zephyr began shouting orders in what sounded like military code. Code black. I repeat, code black. The human is consuming pre-decomposed embryonic tissue. It's a sentry egg, Jake called out over the chaos. It's a delicacy. A what now? Commander Vextal had gone completely purple, which Jake figured probably wasn't a good sign. A delicacy. You know, fancy food, special occasion stuff. The silence that followed was broken only by the sound of Dr. Quinoa sobbing quietly into his tentacles. You're telling me, Admiral Zephyr said slowly, that your species considers these biological weapons to be celebratory? Jake looked around at the room full of horrified aliens, then down at his half-eaten breakfast, then back at the aliens. Well, when you put it like that, I guess we really are pretty hardcore. Jake, feeling like he was making progress in the worst possible way, decided to double down on the diplomacy angle. Look, how about I share some of this with you guys? Nothing says, "We come in peace," like a good meal, right? The silence that followed was so complete that Jake could hear the air recycling systems 3 decks away. "He wants to poison us," someone whispered from the back of the chamber. "No, no," Jake said quickly, raising his hands in what he hoped was a universal gesture of peace. "I want to share. It's a human thing. We share food with people we like." Dr. Kinoa, who had just managed to stop hyperventilating, immediately started again. "He's claiming affection while threatening chemical warfare," the scientist wheezed. "This is either the most sophisticated psychological manipulation I've ever witnessed, or humans have evolved beyond our understanding of survival instincts. Both options are terrifying," Admiral Zephyr muttered. Jake reached into his cooler and pulled out a small packet of crackers. "These are just crackers. Plain, simple, boring crackers. Surely these can't be considered weapons." He held one up to the light. It looked innocent enough, just a small square of baked grain with a few sesame seeds on top. The kind of thing you'd find in any break-room vending machine across human space. Dr. Quinoa aimed his medical scanner at the cracker, and immediately the device started smoking. Not the good kind of smoking, like bacon, but the bad kind, like electronics having a nervous breakdown. "Impossible," the doctor muttered, frantically adjusting settings. "The scanner is detecting trace amounts of everything. Salt levels that would dehydrate a Croxian in seconds. Grain compounds that read as mild neurotoxins. And what are these dark specks?" "Sesame seeds," Jake said helpfully. The scanner exploded. Actual sparks flew as the device gave up trying to process what it was seeing and decided to commit electronic suicide instead. Dr. Quinoa stared at the smoking remains of his equipment with the expression of someone whose worldview had just been hit by a meteor. "The scanner couldn't handle it," he whispered. "A medical device designed to analyze the biology of 400 different species, and it couldn't handle a human snack food." "To be fair," Jake said, trying to be helpful, "those crackers are pretty stale. I wouldn't eat them either." This comment somehow made things worse. Admiral Zephyr leaned forward, his compound eyes reflecting the emergency lighting in a way that reminded Jake uncomfortably of a disco ball at a rave. "You're saying these toxins degrade over time and become even more dangerous?" "Whatever. No, they just get less crunchy." "Less crunchy," the Admiral repeated slowly, like he was trying to decode an alien language, which, Jake realized, he technically was. Commander Vextall had been quiet during this exchange, but now he stepped forward with the bearing of someone about to deliver devastating news. "Human Jake Morrison, I need to inform you of something that may come as a shock. More shocking than being arrested for eating breakfast? Our preliminary biological scans of your digestive system are unprecedented." Vextall consulted a tablet that was glowing ominously. "Your stomach acid has a pH level that should, by all known laws of biology, dissolve your internal organs." "Yeah, heartburn's a real problem," Jake nodded. "That's why we invented antacids." "Anti-acids?" Dr. Quinoa perked up from where he was mourning his scanner. "You mean you have developed countermeasures for your own internal chemical weapons? I guess you could put it that way. Furthermore," Vextall continued, warming to his theme, "your blood contains iron levels that would be toxic to most carbon-based life forms. Your muscle tissue shows evidence of consuming what we can only describe as concentrated plant toxins." "Vegetables," Jake interrupted. "You're describing vegetables, and your brain chemistry indicates regular exposure to substances that would cause immediate psychological breakdown in any civilized species." Jake thought about his morning routine. Coffee, definitely. The occasional beer after a long haul. That time he'd tried that new energy drink that claimed to contain 17 different stimulants. Come to think of it, the warning label had been pretty extensive. "Look," Jake said, "I get that this all sounds bad when you put it like that, but humans have been eating this stuff for thousands of years. We're fine." "Define fine," Admiral Zephyr said. Jake opened his mouth to respond, then closed it again. "How do you explain to a room full of aliens that humans regularly consume substances that could theoretically kill them, do it for fun, and call it cuisine? How do you describe a species that invented spicy food not because they needed it to survive, but because regular food was too boring?" "We're aggressively fine," he offered. The emergency council session that followed was conducted in 17 different alien languages, but Jake didn't need a translator to understand the general gist. Phrases like extinction level threat, quarantine protocols, and notify the high command tend to translate pretty universally, especially when accompanied by frantic gesturing and what sounded like several species-specific versions of panic. "So," Jake said to Commander Vextall during a brief recess, "on a scale of 1 to 10, how screwed am I?" Vextall looked at him with what might have been pity, if aliens with 3 eyes and purple skin could express pity. "Human Jake Morrison, you may have just started an interstellar incident by eating lunch." "Breakfast," Jake corrected. "And technically I haven't finished it yet." 3 hours later, Jake found himself back in the interrogation chamber, but this time the atmosphere had shifted from dangerous criminal to fascinating specimen that might accidentally end civilization. The entire Galactic Council had assembled, which apparently was a big deal, judging by the number of different species now staring at him through reinforced glass, like he was an exhibit at the galaxy's most dangerous zoo. "All right," Jake said, finally reaching the end of his patience, which admittedly hadn't been very long to begin with. "I've been sitting here for half a day while you all debate whether my lunch is going to destroy the universe. Can someone please explain to me what the hell is going on?" Chancellor Mordun, who looked like a cross between a walrus and a filing cabinet, cleared what Jake assumed were throat equivalents. "Human Morrison, the Galactic Council has been observing your species from a distance for approximately 300 of your Earth years." "Observing?" Jake raised an eyebrow. "You mean spying?" "We prefer maintaining safe surveillance protocols," the Chancellor corrected diplomatically. "Our initial contact teams reported that Earth was inhabited by a species of such extraordinary lethality that direct contact would result in immediate extinction." "Wait, what?" Jake leaned forward. "You've been avoiding us for 3 centuries because you think we're dangerous?" "Not think," Admiral Zephyr interjected. "No. The first expedition reported a world where the very air was toxic. The native life forms consumed each other for sustenance, and the dominant species had weaponized everything from plant extracts to fermented organic matter." "You mean oxygen, food, and alcohol?" Jake said slowly. "Precisely." Dr. Quinoa nodded enthusiastically. "Your planet's atmospheric composition alone should have killed you millions of years ago. Oxygen is one of the most corrosive substances in the known universe. Most civilized species use it only in controlled laboratory settings, and even then with extreme caution." Jake stared at him. "We breathe it." "Yes, that's what makes you terrifying. But," Jake struggled to process this, "if you've been watching us for 300 years, surely you noticed that we're not actually trying to kill everything. I mean, we have art, music, literature. We make romantic comedies, for crying out loud." "We assumed those were psychological warfare techniques," Commander Vextal admitted, looking slightly embarrassed. "Especially the romantic comedies. The idea of deliberately inflicting emotional manipulation for entertainment purposes seemed particularly cruel." "And your music," Chancellor Mordun added with a shudder. "The frequency patterns should cause immediate neurological shutdown in any sapient species. Instead, you appear to enjoy it." "Some of it," Jake said defensively. "Okay, maybe not death metal at 3 in the morning, but that's more of a neighbor issue than a species issue." The assembled aliens exchanged looks that Jake was starting to recognize as the universal expression for "this human just made things worse somehow." "Death metal?" Dr. Quinella whispered, frantically taking notes. "They've weaponized heavy elements and sonic frequencies." "It's just really loud music with aggressive lyrics," Jake said quickly. "Nobody actually dies. The fact that you've named it after mortality suggests otherwise," Admiral Zephyr observed. Jake rubbed his temples, feeling a headache coming on, which, he realized, probably looked like some kind of hostile gesture to the aliens. Sure enough, several of them tensed up when he moved his hands to his head. "Look," he said, trying a different approach. "I get that Earth seems dangerous from the outside, but think about it logically. If we were really as lethal as you think we are, wouldn't we have conquered the galaxy by now? Instead, we're out here driving space trucks and delivering machine parts. How threatening can we be?" The silence that followed was thoughtful rather than terrified, which Jake took as progress. "He raises a valid point," Chancellor Mordun said eventually. "A species capable of consuming molecular acid for pleasure should theoretically have no trouble with interstellar conquest. Unless," Admiral Zephyr said slowly, "they're so lethal that they've learned to restrain themselves. Or," Dr. Quinoa added excitedly, "they're so adapted to extreme conditions that the rest of the galaxy poses no challenge to them. They might not even notice our defenses." Jake could feel the conversation sliding back toward panic territory. No, you're overthinking this. We're not restrained superweapons. We're just stubborn." "Stubborn?" Commander Vextal leaned forward. "Yef. Earth is a pretty harsh place, so we evolved to be tough enough to handle it. But that doesn't make us aggressive. It just means we're really, really hard to kill." Jake thought about humanity's greatest hits: surviving ice ages, climbing mountains because they were there, eating spicy food until their faces went numb, drinking beverages that could dissolve rust, and somehow deciding that all of this was fun. "Actually," he continued, warming to the theme, "most of what you think of as deadly human behavior is just us trying to entertain ourselves. We get bored easily, so we invented increasingly ridiculous ways to have fun. Extreme sports, competitive eating, reality television." "Reality television?" Dr. Quinoa looked confused. "Trust me, You don't want to know. The council spent the next 20 minutes debating in hushed tones, while Jake sat there wondering if this was the weirdest Tuesday of his life, or just Tuesday. Eventually, Chancellor Mordoon called for order. "Human Morrison," the Chancellor said formally, "it appears we may have misunderstood your species' intentions." "You think?" Jake said sarcastically. "However, this raises a new concern. If humans are not aggressive conquerors but merely recreational toxin consumers, then you may be the solution to several galactic problems we've been facing." Jake had a sinking feeling that his day was about to get even weirder. "What kind of problems?" Admiral Zephyr consulted his tablet. "Well, there's the Andromedian plague ship that's been drifting through Sector 7 for the past decade. The toxin levels are so high that no one can get close enough to salvage it. And the abandoned mining station in the Vega system," Dr. Quinoa added. "The atmospheric processors malfunctioned and filled the entire facility with corrosive gases. Oh, and the diplomatic situation with the spice traders of Kepler 4842, Commander Vextal said. They keep offering us these mild seasonings that hospitalize anyone who tries them." Jake looked around the room at all the expectant alien faces. "Let me get this straight. You want to hire humans as professional poison eaters?" "When you put it like that," Chancellor Mordoon said, "it sounds rather undignified. We prefer to think of it as biological hazard specialists." Jake grinned for the first time since this whole mess started. "You know what? That actually sounds kind of awesome." 6 months later, Jake stood behind the counter of what had to be the strangest restaurant in the galaxy. Morrison's Intergalactic Diner occupied an entire deck of Harmony Station, the galaxy's newest diplomatic outpost, and it was packed with aliens cautiously attempting to understand human cuisine. "Okay, Ambassador Veltar," Jake said to the nervous-looking Centaurian diplomat seated at the counter. "Today we're going to try something really adventurous. Are you ready?" Ambassador Veltar, who looked like a cross between a praying mantis and a tax attorney, nodded with the determination of someone about to defuse a bomb. "I have taken all necessary precautions, Human Jake. My medical team is standing by and I have updated my will." "It's toast," Jake said gently. "Bread that's been heated until it's slightly brown." "Ah, yes," Veltar nodded sagely. "Thermal modification of grain matter. A classic human intimidation technique." Jake had learned not to argue with these interpretations. It was easier to just roll with it. He dropped 2 slices of perfectly ordinary white bread into the toaster and watched as half the restaurant leaned forward in anticipation, like they were watching a controlled demolition. The toast popped up with its usual cheerful ding, and several aliens jumped backward. "Phase 1 complete," Dr. Quinoa announced from his observation post in the corner, where he was documenting every meal for the Galactic Medical Archive. "The human has successfully activated the thermal weapon." "It's not a weapon, it's breakfast," Jake said for probably the 1,000th time, but he was smiling as he said it. He'd been officially appointed as the galaxy's first culinary ambassador, a position that apparently came with diplomatic immunity and a really nice salary. Not bad for a guy who used to haul machine parts for a living. He spread a thin layer of butter on the toast. Real butter, not the synthetic stuff most of the galaxy used, and watched Ambassador Veltar's compound eyes track the movement like he was following a laser sight. "The human is applying some form of lipid coating," Veltar observed. "I assume this increases the lethality." "It increases the deliciousness," Jake corrected, sliding the plate across the counter. "Just try a small bite. Trust me." Ambassador Veltar picked up the toast with the careful precision of someone handling plutonium, brought it to what Jake assumed was his mouth, and took the tiniest possible bite. His entire body went rigid for about 3 seconds, and Jake started to worry that he'd just accidentally poisoned his first diplomatic contact. Then Veltar's antennae started twitching rapidly, which Jake had learned was the Centaurian equivalent of a smile. "This is..." Veltar paused, searching for words. "This is not terrible?" "High praise," Jake grinned. "Want to try it with jam?" "Jam?" Dr. Quinoa looked up from his notes. "You mean concentrated fruit toxins, suspended in crystallized plant sweetener?" "I mean strawberry jam, but sure, your way sounds more impressive." The success with toast had led to other breakthroughs. The Arcturan trade delegation had discovered that they could actually tolerate mild salsa, which had revolutionized their entire agricultural export industry. The vegan representatives, who were from Vega, not dietary vegans, which had caused some initial confusion, had become obsessed with human cheese, despite the fact that the concept of fermented animal milk had initially made them question the sanity of the entire species. Jake's personal favorite success story was Admiral Zephyr, who had become addicted to decaffeinated coffee. It was still strong enough to keep him awake for 3 days straight, but he claimed it helped him think more clearly during battle planning sessions. The fact that the galaxy's military leader was now dependent on human coffee for strategic thinking struck Jake as either deeply concerning or absolutely hilarious. "Human Jake!" a new voice called from across the restaurant. Jake looked up to see Commander Vextal approaching, with what appeared to be an entire family of purple aliens in tow. "I'd like you to meet my offspring. They've been very curious about human food preparation techniques." The little purple aliens, who looked like miniature versions of their father, complete with tiny pompous hats, stared up at Jake with the wide-eyed fascination of children meeting their favorite superhero. "Are you really going to cook something dangerous?" the smallest one asked in a voice like tinkling bells. "I'm going to make pancakes," Jake said solemnly. "They're round, fluffy, and we put sweet syrup on top." The collective gasp from the young aliens was adorable. "He's going to create geometric food structures," one whispered to another. "And then apply concentrated tree essence." "Maple syrup," Jake corrected, but he was already reaching for his mixing bowl. "Who wants to help?" What followed was probably the most chaotic cooking lesson in galactic history. The young aliens were fascinated by every step of the process, from cracking eggs, he's liberating the embryonic proteins, to mixing the batter, he's creating a chemical suspension matrix, to finally pouring the batter onto the griddle and watching it bubble and cook. "It's transforming," one of them breathed in amazement. "The human is using controlled thermal energy to restructure the molecular bonds. And now we flip it," Jake said, tossing the pancake in the air and catching it perfectly on the other side. The young aliens cheered like he'd just performed actual magic. By the time the pancakes were ready, a crowd had gathered. Jake stacked them high, added butter and syrup, and cut the stack into small pieces so everyone could try some. The reactions ranged from cautious appreciation to complete bewilderment, but nobody died, which Jake considered a win. "You know," Commander Vextal said as his children demolished their portions with enthusiasm, "when we first encountered you, we thought humans were the most dangerous species in the galaxy." "And now?" Jake asked, refilling coffee cups and noting that half his customers were now regular visitors. "Now we think you might be the most useful," Vextal smiled, "though possibly still the most dangerous." Last week, the Sirius Trade Council declared war on the Proxima Alliance over who gets exclusive rights to human pizza. Jake paused in his coffee pouring. "Please tell me you're joking." "The conflict has been designated the Pepperoni Wars in the official records," Dr. Quinoa called out from his corner. 3 star systems are now involved. "Over pizza? Your food appears to be somewhat addictive to most species," Vextal explained diplomatically. "The Andromedans have offered to trade their entire dilithium mining operation for the recipe to chocolate chip cookies." Jake looked around his restaurant, taking in the sight of dozens of alien species peacefully sharing meals that had once been considered weapons of mass destruction. A Craxian diplomat was teaching a Centaurian child how to properly dip French fries in ketchup. A group of vegan traders were having an animated discussion about the subtle differences between cheddar and Gouda. Admiral Zephyr was in the corner, working on battle plans while nursing his 3rd cup of decaf. "You know what?" Jake said, refilling Vextal's coffee cup. "I think I can live with being the galaxy's most dangerous chef." "Culinary ambassador," Dr. Quinoa corrected from his notes. "Right. Culinary ambassador," Jake grinned and called out to the restaurant. "So, who's ready to try something really terrifying for lunch? I'm thinking grilled cheese sandwiches." The collective cheer that went up from his customers was probably loud enough to be heard in the next star system. Outside the restaurant's windows, the stars wheeled slowly by, and somewhere in the distance, Jake was pretty sure he could hear the opening notes of what would eventually become known as the Galactic Food Wars. But that was a problem for tomorrow. Today he had aliens to feed and a galaxy to introduce to the wonders of comfort food. And honestly, that sounded like the best job in the universe.